Hi there. Welcome to the Sober Circle channel. Enjoy this speaker tape.
Oh. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear well in the back? I want to thank everyone that stayed. A lot of people told me beginning Thursday that we going home early Sunday morning, and I began yesterday to beg some to stay, really, because and then I had a few friends there, and I asked them if they would get some of their friends to stay, and one fellow said it took him 8 hours to get home. I said, good God, it takes me 12. And so I really appreciate the ones that stayed, and I want you to listen very carefully. I've got some important things to say, and I thank you for inviting me. All of those who were responsible, thank you. I thank Ted and his wife and family and all of the ones who have been taking care of me. I appreciate that very much. We haven't had a spiritual joke yet this morning. I knew of a girl one time of Catholic persuasion who wanted a pet. She went down to the pet shop and purchased her a beautiful girl parrot, took the pet home and was enjoying the bird, and late in the evening the parrot had an attitude change, and she started cursing and carrying on in some of the most profane ways you ever heard in your life. Well, it upset her a great deal, and this went on every week, and finally she went down to see the father. She said, I've really got a problem. I bought me a beautiful girl parrot, and every afternoon she just breaks my heart with her profanity. He said, child, God must have sent you here. I, too, have some parrots, but mine are very devout and good birds, and I would suggest that you go get your bird and bring her over here and let her be around my birds, and maybe we can eliminate some of her character defects. So she rushed back home and got her girl parrot out of the cage and brought it back over to the father's house, and they were entering the room about to put the pretty little girl parrot into the cage with the two other parrots, and they were there chanting their prayers and playing with their beads, and when they opened the door to put her in the cage, one of them looked over and saw what was happening. He punched the other one. He said, you can drop these damn beads, our prayers are answered. So I prayed for you to stay, but don't throw your beads down. I'm Dupree Westbury. I'm an alcoholic, and I'm a drug addict, and I'm a member of the St. George group of Alcoholics Anonymous. Hi, everybody. Hi. I've got to talk fast and quick because I've got a lot to say. The first thing that we read about Alcoholics Anonymous is that it's a fellowship. Fellowship of people who care, and fellowship of people who understand, fellowship of people who love. And this is important. This was the attraction that caused me to stay when I went to my first meeting, that it was a fellowship. You loved me before you understood me, and you've continued to do that. So fellowship has a great deal of value in our program, and it's been demonstrated here this weekend. Everybody loving and kissing, and you get little gold dots for it, and I think that's pretty neat, you know. It really is. Everything that you've done, I've enjoyed. All of the people, all of the speakers. I came down here to get something, and I got something. I got to fellowship with people who love me. So fellowship is important. To illustrate this, I always tell a story about a couple who lived in there where I live and retired and moved out into the country, and they wanted to raise some hogs. And he got him a mama hog and put her in a pen. And every morning he would go out to see if he had any little hogs, and he never had any little hogs. So he was talking to a neighbor about this predicament one time. He said, you need to go down and see the veterinarian and tell him what your problems are. So he went down and told the veterinarian. He says, you know, I got me a mama hog, and I want some little hogs, and I don't have any. So he read him chapter 5 on how you get little hogs. And he went back home, and the next morning he got up and he got that old sow out of the pen, put her in the wheelbarrow, and rolled her down to the Joneses for some fellowship. and brought her back and put her in the pen. And next morning he went out and looked. He didn't have any little hogs. And he knew what to do. He just got her out and put her back in the wheelbarrow and took her down the road again for some more fellowship. And the third morning he wasn't up quite as early as his wife, and he says, honey, would you go out and see if we have any little hogs? And very shortly she came back in, and she said, honey, we don't have any little hogs, but that old sow's in the wheelbarrow ready to go. So, that's the way it is. When people come to AA, they don't have to make many trips in the wheelbarrow to find out that they are welcome. And this thing has an addiction to it, as been stated earlier. We like, being understood, and being loved. There's so much happening today for the benefit of the alcoholic. When I came in 16 years ago, there was nothing said about alcoholism. The family didn't know anything. No one knew anything. Just put you in the state asylum, lock you up in jail. That was it. I know 400 people today that are dead because they didn't know anything about the first step. I know 400 today that's in prison. And I know 400 today that's probably in the insane institutions. And then I see 400 here. So you've got to know today that God has really blessed you by being here. So there's a lot now for the alcoholic, a lot for the family. You see Al-Anon's spots on television. You have all types of things on radio programs about helping the alcoholic. A lot of people say, well, I don't believe in that drug and alcohol abuse program in my county. I just fill them up with pills, and we never can get them to come to the meeting. We don't get a chance to do no 12-step work anymore, and it's just a damn mess. But I'll tell you what, anybody that says that alcoholism is an illness and holds out a hand to help anybody, I thank God for them. I really do, because it's a dreadful illness. It's one that kills, it's one that cripples, it's a sad one, and it almost killed me. In fact, I wanted to die. So I just thank God for anything that's said about alcoholism. There was a couple back home one time going to a masquerade party, wanted to win first prize, kind of like The Voice, different. And he suggested that they might dress up like a cow, So she dressed up like a pretty female cow, and he dressed up like a bull. You can't get in a car with a costume on like that, so they had to walk to the party. And they were walking to the party, and they had to go by this pasture where this real bull was. And as they were walking by this pasture, the real bull saw her dressed up in her pretty uniform, and he started pawing the ground, man. I mean, getting all upset. Whatever happens, man. He got excited, and he started running across the pasture, coming toward her. And she looked at the husband and said, look at that bull. He's coming over here where we are. What are we going to do? He said, well, I'll tell you what now. I'm going to stand here and make out like I'm eating grass, but you better hold on to something, And so coming to AA, it's given me something to hold on to when things start to coming at me. I can't think of any illness any worse than alcoholism unless it's drug addiction, and I had both problems. I took my first drink when I was 16 years old. Got drunk, walked around, beat myself on the chest, thought I was a red-eyed Eddie Indian. Never has been a tribe like that in South Carolina. But I had gone off with some girls, and the girls down home were like AA. They said, if you want what we have, and you're willing to go to any length to get it, there are certain things you do. And I took a drink, and I went off with them, and I got drunk. And I remember how dreadfully bad I felt the next morning, and I said that I wouldn't drink anymore. And I, too, like Jim from Fort Worth, came up in the Baptist church where if you danced, you'd go to hell. Played cards, you'd go to hell. If you went to the picture show, you'd go to hell. If you drank liquor, you'd go to hell. And if you committed adultery, you did not have the opportunity to die. The devil would get you while you was walking around. And I started noticing all these things that would send me to hell. And I never will forget the first time I kissed a girl in the mouth, and she kissed me back. There's a great difference. And had on one of these fuzzy Angora sweaters, and just a delightful specimen. And I kissed her, and she felt so good, and I held her, and God, I didn't want to turn loose. I knew from looking at the picture show, you were just supposed to do it a little bit and quit. But I didn't want to do that. But finally, I did quit. But I really did enjoy it. So a lot of things that was going to send me to hell got my attention early. And I began to do these things and became very disenchanted with what I heard in the church. Very disenchanted with what I heard in the church. You know, God loved me, and at the same time, He was going to burn me in hell, and I flat couldn't appreciate nobody what wanted to burn me up. Now, I'm here to tell you, we did not have a good relationship, and I quit going. I would go when we had funerals. You can drink at a funeral if you don't get too far out of the way. And you can kind of drink a little bit at weddings, too, and but, you know, other than that, I didn't have any need to go. I felt like I needed to go, felt like I wanted to go, wanted to have what I saw other people have, wanted to feel like they felt. Never could be like that. Nobody explained to me God like you have explained God to me. Therefore, I did not have the relationship that I should have had. I continued to do these things. I went into World War II, and somebody asked me, he said, well, if you were in there, that's probably why it lasted as long as it did. But really, I didn't do anything significant to make it any longer or any shorter, but I did learn a number of things while I was in the big war. I always specify that, World War II. And I came home wearing the ruptured duck, and even the Baptists would let you drink if you were a veteran, came back home. And I just got real busy drinking and doing things, and I don't know what year I became an alcoholic. I used to think it was 1955, and then I said, no, it was 1960. It was the first time I went in the hospital. I've been hospitalized 42 times for drug addiction and alcoholism, which is a lot of times. And it proves that no human power can relieve your alcoholism. And then somebody in St. George or the community will come up to me and say, hey, how are you feeling now? How are you doing now? You know that they remember how it was. I mean, when they tell you that, do you remember the time that you did so-and-so? So I think I did alcoholic things long before I thought I became an alcoholic. I'm not sure. But the trouble began in 1960. I married a very beautiful girl, absolutely delightful thing to look at, to have and to hold, to cherish, and everything about her was beautiful. This was before frost-free refrigerators. She could just put her hands on ours, and it would defrost the inside. She could just touch it, man, flat and pretty. And I've heard C.D. Collins say that people say that alcoholics don't love their families, but I submit to you that that's a damn lie. Alcoholics love as deeply and need to be loved, more so than anybody that I know, but alcoholics have a terrible time loving and being loved. Receiving and giving. It's difficult for me to receive. It's difficult for me to give. It's difficult for me to express. I have troubles with my sensitiveness to certain things. I didn't know anything about what was happening to me, and I continued to drink. All of my life I had been poor, and I said if I got to be a man, I'd get rich, and I would be happy. And if those of you who have ever heard John Van Dyke speak, and I can use his full name because he has now passed on, he was dean of the cathedral in Oklahoma City. And he was from the Netherlands, and he said in his Dutch accent, if you ask a boy in high school what would make him happy, if he just had a Thunderbird, he would be happy. And when he gets to Thunderbird, he ain't happy. And then if he just had a girl built like a brick cathedral, then he would be happy. And he gets the girl, and he's not happy. And then if he just had plenty of money, then he would be happy. And he gets that, and he's not happy. And all of these things came to me in due time, and I wasn't happy. I continued to drink. Continued. I never shall forget those days when I wanted to quit, and I could not. In the evenings when it was necessary to drink before I went home or after I got home, every day, it seemed. I knew that something was wrong, but yet nothing real bad had happened. But my illness progressed. By the time in 1960, I was unpredictable. I did things that I regretted, and I had to be hospitalized. And they put me in the state asylum. I knew that somebody, I knew in 1960, if somebody could get a movie of that damn thing, they would win an Academy Award. And it took Jack Nicholson and these other people years to make The Cuckoo's Nest, but I knew it a long time ago, man. It was a strange place, to say the least. And there I was in this hospital for my alcoholism. And I remember going in the sun porch. The alcoholics with their back to the wall. I think we must have invented radar, watching everybody. And then the psycho people in the middle, they would do these serpentine acts, dive over one table, crawl under the other, and get up and go across the next one, and go to the back of the room, pull the shoe off, and tear the clock up. And over on the other side was the people who were aborted from the Oral Roberts and Billy Graham programs, doing their ministry from Life magazine. And, you know, when you get in a situation like that, you can tell where you belong right quick. I mean, you know, you ever seen an alcoholic that wasn't with his group? We bring people to AA and say, now listen, going in the meeting, you'll be all right. You'll feel comfortable. You'll see somebody down there, you know, draw up my damn knot like a $5 Georgia mule and say, man, I ain't going in there. We have always been together. At the Red Rooster, when we were drinking in the jail, when we went to jail together, in the asylum, when we went to the asylum together, and in AA. And some in the graveyard. We have always been together. Always needed each other. We are a result of one another. So here I am in that place. And I said when I got out, I never would drink again. And God knows I meant that. But I did not know that the first drink would create a compulsion and a need for me to continue drinking. And I drank again. I became very successful in sales. In fact, I worked for 3 companies simultaneously. I made more money than the President of the United States and was the biggest damn fool in South Carolina. Now, if you want to see a problem, you get an alcoholic who is in the last stages of his alcoholism, and he's suddenly successful. Now, this is a strange, delicate, bad situation to be in. So I went to a doctor one day. You know, you wake up in the morning and you see these blue marks on your wife's throat, and the children got running scared, and the dog never did get in my lap like Paul talked about, but they kind of stay off there on the edge, and they watch you for a while and see what you're going to do and whether you're going to breathe and whether your eyes go open, and if they do, whether they white. And finally, they'll kind of drift into you, you know. When you see the horrible things, when I saw the things that I had done, I wanted to change. I've heard people say, well, that old boy come to the meeting the other night. I don't believe he got no desire to be sober. By God, I ain't never met an alcoholic that didn't want to be sober. Never. Might not want to be sober forever, but I've seen them wanting to be with an honest desire long before they ever heard chapter 5 read. I wanted to be sober. But I couldn't. I drank again. I went to this doctor one day and told him who I was. I will always tell you who I am if you don't know. And I told him how successful I was. And he was one of these doctors that charge you about $50, you know, for a diagnosis. You can't find out what's wrong with you when you go to a $50 doctor that day. Now, you can go to John Mooney in Statesboro and give him $10, and he'd tell you, well, there's nothing wrong with you. You just got ridiculitis. Just take aspirin. You really shouldn't take that, and go home. But if you go to a $50 doctor and you go back in a week and he got a diagnostic thing on you, and he starts to read, and he said, Mr. Westbury, my first observation was that you're extremely nervous. If you've been drinking liquor for 15 years, you're going to be nervous. And if I didn't shake when I went in, I tried to, you know. I wanted him to know how bad I felt. But he says, I'm going to help you. I'm going to teach you hypnosis. And while you're under this hypnotic trance, I'm going to suggest to you to slow down, boy. You're going to blow your fuse if you keep going like you're going. Working for all them companies, making all that money. Just work for one company, give me a little bit of the money, learn this hypnotic training, and you're going to be all right. Well, he took me in the room, laid me down, and tied off this arm and rubber band, and said, I'm going to give you 7 grains of sodium amytal. You heard somebody talk about that, Paul, last night, about getting a little bit in the car, and if he got too much, he couldn't make it, have to run, turn the corner, get in the bed, and all that stuff. Well, he said, now, I'm going to put this thing in your arm, pull back on this plunger, and the blood will fly in there with it. Now, don't let this upset you. He said, now, when I do this, I'm going to start the injection of this stuff into your vein. And when I do, you're going to feel better immediately. And when you feel comfortable, would you please raise your finger? And everybody can see that it works. All right, he started giving me that stuff, and when he did, I began to appreciate myself immediately. I felt much better, And the more he gave me, the better I felt. And by God, I wasn't going to stop it. I needed to feel better. So he just gave me all of it, you know. And you wait there for just a few seconds, and I just went out like a light. And when I woke up, I told him he'd have to do it again, I guess. And he did do it again. And he tried to help me. He gave me medicine to take in the morning, medicine to take at noon, medicine to take at night, you know, all them pills. As Dave Cook said, taking them tablets, boy. I was taking them tablets and doing good. Wasn't drinking too much liquor then. I looked like the Pepsi-Cola people. I was thin, man, wasn't eating nothing. My eyes was white, but I had a strange look on my face. Walking around, you know, really. People ask me today, so what's the difference between an alcoholic and a drug addict? I can tell you what the difference is. You can fill up somebody, give them 3 or 4 drinks of liquor, lay them down here on the floor, and come by and ask them what's wrong. They say, well, I just had a few drinks. I'm trying to get up all the time. You can take the same fellow and fill him up with dope, and he'll lay out there like a corpse, and you go by and ask him what's wrong. He said, nothing. He's supposed to be down there. So I started taking this dope, you know, and I ain't vomiting on nobody. My eyes is white, and I can pretty well determine what's going to happen. I got my life programmed to get up in the morning and take one to make me feel better. At noon, I take the one to make me rest, to quiet my anxieties, and I'm taking this hypnotic treatment, you know. And I go home, and the wife said, well, what is he doing for you? I said, this is what we are doing. I'm involved in the treatment. But I wouldn't expect you to understand. I don't know why alcoholics marry these stupid people, but every one of us get one that doesn't understand. But if you insist, I'll show you. You know, when I go home in the evening after this treatment, I can't even walk. I got to go in a cab, man. I'm wobbling around and say, here's Daddy. He doesn't come back from the doctor, but, you know, he ain't shooting at nobody. He got to be better. So I said, well, this is how this thing works. Now, we go in the den, and, of course, this isn't like the doctor's office. We don't have here what we have down there, you know. But we go in where it's quiet and peaceful for my benefit. And we turn on this blue light, and I look at that blue light, and we start this metronome to ticking. Click, click, click. And every time it clicks, I breathe in, and every time it clicks, I breathe out. And when I do that 3 dozen times, I'll be in a trance. She said, you kidding? I said, no. I said, that's right. You're going to get a nice pick, stick it right through my arm. I wouldn't even know it. She said, I might try that. But I go in there right hurriedly and get some of my pills and take them and drink me a hot cup of coffee so it'll react real fast, you know. And I go in there and turn the television on to a station where they ain't got no picture, just kind of gray looking, didn't have no blue light, but I figured a gray one would work. We didn't have no metronome. She goes in the kitchen and gets a pan. I said, and you sit down by me and beat with a constant, steady rhythm. She's sitting down by me beating on this biscuit pan, and I'm looking at the TV set, and every time she hits it, I'll breathe in. Every time she hits it, I'll breathe out. Now, I got 2 children now, and they're circling the house like young bird dogs, and they run through the room, and they look at Daddy. He's oohing and ahhing, and Mama's hitting on the biscuit pan watching Daddy. And and we say it's not a family illness. We hadn't hurt anybody but ourselves. I mean, how sick can you be? It's family illness. So my family suffered. But I kept right on taking that dope, you know, and I didn't drink no liquor. But I got to where I could take a whole lot of that stuff. And I was a legal addict. I took drugs long before it was fashionable and before it was the in thing. I have the opportunity to talk to a lot of young people today about drugs, a lot of schools and a lot of prisons, and I think this is my God-given opportunity to share, to talk about one thing that I know something about. And I always try to impress them with this. You may drink and might not become an alcoholic, but there are no exceptions to drugs. Absolutely none. I can take any of you in the audience with any, but it doesn't make it, there's no exception, and put you in a cage and give you a quart of morphine every 4 hours and keep you there for 2 weeks and come back 2 weeks' time, open the door and say you can go home, you wouldn't leave for hell. Stay right there. So this is what happened to me. I wasn't drinking no liquor, but, man, I was taking my dope, you know. And finally it got to where I had to do something about this. The family had to leave. I couldn't work anymore, and things, I didn't know what I was doing, you know. Like if I got up too late in the morning to take my morning ones, I just mix them in along with my evening ones. And you just take a whole lot of them together. Well, taking dope ain't like drinking liquor. I mean, you stay on a pint a day for years, and you start taking dope, 2 on Monday, 4 on Tuesday, 16 on Thursday, and it just has a tremendous multiplication factor. So you got to take a whole lot of it, and after a while you get all screwed up, and don't know where you're at, and don't know why you're taking it, and you get where you don't care. And it doesn't make any difference. So drugs, the 2 greatest things in life by nature is, first of all, is reproduction by sex. This is our greatest motivated drive by nature, and the second one is self-preservation. This is why somebody will crawl in somebody's bedroom window, and then if they get caught, jump out before they get killed. They come in that order. And drugs will eliminate both of these things. Now, you get where you don't want no sex, but you're walking down the street because you don't want nobody talking about you. You know what I mean. Walk with a girl. Yeah, man, I want to stay with a girl. So I wind up in Lexington, Kentucky. And my senator got me an appointment there. A lot of people go to Annapolis and West Point, and I went to Lexington. Well, I got out to Lexington. It was July the 2nd, 1962. And when my brother flew out with me, and to make certain I got there. And I got to Lexington, they gave me a number, 66777, full house. Now, whenever anything happened to me, or if anything was coming to me, or if I did anything, this number was what they used. I would go in to see if I had any mail, and I would look to see if 66777 had any correspondence. But you know, when you've done what I did, and you've worn out the people that I wore out, if you've disappointed the people I disappointed, then you ain't going to be getting too many letters, are you? No, you aren't going to get many, but when you get one, my God, it really do appreciate it. So if you ever have the opportunity to write anybody that's in the hospital, in prison sometime, write them. They are extremely grateful for anything they can hear, see. But I stayed in this place for the cure. They told me that they could get me off drugs and keep me off, and they started to bringing me off these drugs. Never in my life have I witnessed such assemblage of humanity in my life. Time stops when you're taking drugs. I saw the clock as it approached 4 o'clock one evening, and Mrs. Brandenburg was going to bring out the dope cart, and she would bring it out, and she'd stand there at the hall in her way and look down the hall to see where we were. And we would rush immediately to our doors and stand in the door and be pretty, because if we weren't, she wouldn't bring the dope. And we stood there, and if somebody was slow getting in the door, by God, we beat him and put him in there damn quick, man. Get in there, and we waited for our drugs. And institutions, some of them have correctional timing devices that have the capacity to readjust themselves at certain hours. In other words, if it's 3 minutes to 4, it's supposed to be 4, she'll flick back and then flip back up on 4 o'clock. So by God, that little boy was standing there from New York watching that clock. 1 more minute now, which is about 5 years long, we're going to get our dope, see? And man, it's almost 4 o'clock, and I see Miss Brandenburg with the cart, and when he's looking, and he doesn't know what the clock is about to do, and the clock flips back, and he pulls his shoe off and tears it up. He thinks it's going to go back the other way. I could stand there until you have this thing again next year and tell you about drugs and couldn't describe to you the hell and the horror. We had an old boy back home in our group one time say, I think old Westbury makes a pretty good talk, but I don't know whether we ought to let these dope fiends in our group or not. I'll tell you what Bill Wilson said. He said AA is a way of life. And come to find out that old boy was taking some dope. He resented the hell out of me. I was in there telling the truth. I have seen more good AA people lose their sobriety with carelessness and the lack of honesty when they went to see their doctor or other people and not run up the flag and say, listen, man, Let me tell you who I am. Let me tell you what I'm trying to do. And don't give me nothing that'll make me feel better or want to feel anything that's better. Takes a while to catch that. I try to do this. And doctors aren't to blame, you know. They'll run around with these pills in their pocket and say, well, I know I probably shouldn't take it, but my doctor gave it to me. You are responsible for your sobriety, period. And you need to remember that. Well, I finally got out of this place. And I went home. And everything that I had thought maybe would happen to me didn't. The things that they told me there did. They said, you from the South, boy, you ain't hooked on this milk sugar and stand back like these boys out the streets of New York and Chicago. And them fellows would come in and lay around for a couple of days, and they'd be up like jackrabbits and going. But, I mean, it took me 21 hard days on withdrawal to come off. I was on 100 quarters of morphine a day and 80 grains of carbital. A heavy dose. There's always some LP and somebody in the crowd said, boy, you can't take that much dope, it would kill you. By God, it would, if you took it all one time. But see, you do it over a period of time. And I came back home, and I thought that I would be free and I could change my life and do some of the things I wanted to do, and I couldn't. They told me in Lexington, said, you'll never be sober as long as you live. Every time you come back to Lexington, we'll open this blue book, and we'll write another chapter in it. We got it waiting on you. He's been here 40 times, and he's been here 18 times, and that was what I saw. I don't know why we have to see so much failure in all of these places before we finally get to where we are today. But it proves something. They told me I would never be sober. That proves one thing. People aren't in charge of sobriety. And thank God for that. If you look in your big book on page 95 and 90, it says, regardless of anyone, doesn't make any difference who it is, if you will get right with God and do what you're supposed to get, you can get sober if you don't like the group secretary. If you don't like the chair. If you don't like the voice, you can get sober if you do certain things. So people aren't in charge. How if we had a sobriety committee? We had Ted was here and Dennis and some of the others, and they're sitting down front, you know, and the meeting's about to start, and in comes this fellow what had some trouble. And they're sitting there holding the chips, you know, each one's got a color they got to hold on to, be responsible for, and account for. I've seen this happen in groups, you know. Look at him coming back. I swear we have spent all the money we had on white chips for that boy. And he comes in the meeting, you know, and he comes up to the sobriety committee and he says, can I come to the meeting tonight? And they said, no, boy, you done used your share, your chips. You can't come. Thank God that getting sober is in God's hands. We couldn't trust it, the people. They told me I would never be sober. I went back home, and the rest of the things that were bad happened. Terrible things. My dignity was gone, my pride. I didn't even want to live, and yet I was alive. I was reduced to drinking hair tonic. My daddy would give me $1. I would go downtown and get a package of Camel cigarettes for 30 cents and a bottle of Vitalis hair tonic for 69. Thank God that was before the dry look. I would come back home and I would shake the Vitalis out into the glass and drink it down and save just a little bit, a sprinkle on my head. If alcoholism is an illness, then it needs its medication. And that was the only medication I had for mine. So many people forget that if this is an illness, it needs its medication. And sometimes we have a tendency to look at a poor drunk somewhere and point at him and laugh and do this hee-haw bit and say, look, old so-and-so, he drunk again. Never have thought it was funny in my life to see a drunk, suffering alcoholic. Never saw anything funny about it. Always breaks my heart. To see what? Well, I was sitting on the back porch at my mother's house, and Mother came out and said to me, said, Dupree, I was at the beauty shop today, that's what we call it. I find myself comfortable calling it that. You call it other things now. And said, Mary was there, and Mary said that since she and Joe had started to go into AA meetings in Walterboro, that Joe had not had a drink. And Mary said to tell you. Now, Mary is Al-Anon. I want y'all to know this right now. Yeah. By God, AAs ain't the only one that'll carry the message. Mary said if you'd like to go to them meetings with them, they would come get you. They knew I didn't have a wheelbarrow to go in. And you know what I said when Mother extended me the invitation that you sent to me to go to my first meeting? I said exactly what you said. I said, why does she give a damn about me? Why does this person whom I don't know care? Well, I can explain that to you. It says in the big book, more will be revealed to you later. It is now later. Do things logically. God does things unlogically. And God was about to do something for me. And for some reason, I got up and said, I'm sorry, and I called Mary, and she said, well, we have a meeting on Thursday night, and we will come by and get you. Now, if you've got an alcoholic that needs to go to a meeting, you're in a rural area, you know he's drank away everything he had, or she, doesn't know anything about AA, doesn't have a car, then sponsorship and getting to people to meeting are terribly important. I was already embarrassed, and I was ashamed. My brothers used to say to me, look like you'd be shame enough to quit. By God, I've been shame enough to cure everybody in this room and didn't do any good. So they came by and got me, and they took me to the meeting, and Paul said last night he didn't know what he heard at the first meeting, and I did. These doctors have, they can get hold of better dope than we can, the ones out the street. It was the first meeting in that building. It was a new building. The group was excited. And I walked in and told them I thought I was an alcoholic, and they said, wonderful. I heard the fellow get up and talk, and I didn't think I'd ever talk. I was so withdrawn and so ashamed. And he told what it was like and what he did and what he constantly and continued doing, and that he was sober. And they had these chips there that night, and they said, if anybody wants to join this group, we ask you to come up and get this chip in front of this group. Don't take this chip after the meeting. Go up there and slip one out the box. By God, if you want help, come get it. And when you take this chip, you're going to tell us by this action that you want help, and we're going to start helping you whether you want it or not. And thank God that's the attitude they had. And I went and got it, and I didn't wait for the last stanza either, brother. When they held it up, just like that, I went and got it. I wanted to be sober, and that date was April the 22nd, 1964. I had no earthly idea that I would never drink again. But you told me some of the things that I needed to hear that night. They said, we are glad you came. And you've got an illness called alcoholism, and if you ever drink, you won't have any choice, and you won't get to the next meeting because you'll be drunk. But if you walk slow and drink ice water and come back Monday night, we're going to have a closed meeting, and this is where we tell you really what's wrong with you. So we just partying and drinking coffee and eating cake now, but Monday night, now, man, we going to put it on you. Them closed meetings where everybody sits down and gets honest or learns to be honest. I was there. My people came to get me again because I still didn't have a wheelbarrow. It's so important to take new people and continue to take them. I've seen people come to the first meeting and then sit down in the back of the room, the old boy sitting there shaky, don't know what's going on, don't know about no chip system, don't know the preamble, don't know they're going to close with the Lord's Prayer, don't know nothing, man. And they said, now, if he don't show some damn signs tonight of being honest, I swear I ain't going to bring him back. And the second step tells us we are flat crazy. We need all the help we can get. We need unity in the group when new people come. Shortly after I got in AA and started talking and got recovered somewhat, I became chairman. My time to make the coffee, my time to get the speaker. And by golly, I done good, too. I didn't have nobody to help me, no wife to wash and polish or nothing. I lined them chairs up like they come from West Point, washed all them ashtrays. We had ashtrays from all over South Carolina. Pontiac, tobacco markets, and just anything, you know. We didn't mind lining them up and washing them. And I had it looking so good, and, you know, it was 20 miles over to the meeting, and I wasn't certain that the fellow before me was a responsible person. So I said, well, we might not have any coffee, and I should take a pound with me. So I got me a pound of Maxwell House coffee, paid $1.39 for it, and took it over to the meeting, you know. But I got there was coffee, and I didn't use mine. I left it sitting there on the counter, and people started coming in telling me how good I had done. The place looked good. And one girl come up and said, who bought that Maxwell House coffee? I stuck my chest out. I bought it. She said, we don't use Maxwell House coffee in this place. We use A&P coffee. It's not but 79 cents a pound, and you paid $1.30 for that. And who do you think's going to give you your money back now? And I bowed up in a knot, and I come out swinging, Bubba. I said, I don't give a damn if I get my money back. I have thought about going to St. George and starting me a group, and I'm going to call it the Saint Group. Not appropriate name for a group in St. George, the Saint Group. And I'm going around pick out the ones in here that I want to be in my group, and you can be in it because I like you. And you, and you, and you, and the rest of you can go to hell. Right. And I went home, I started riding around at night looking for me a place to have my group meet. And I tell you, a little town like I come from, anytime after 12 o'clock you ride around looking and stopping, they start watching you. Because, see, they remembered how I used to be. They were the people who were asking me how I was doing now. Resentments have started a lot of groups. And some of them weren't. This is what I told the people that saved my life. Go to hell, I'm going to start my own group. But I didn't, thank God. I stayed there with them. They told me and showed me things, exhibited things, made me feel things, and made me want things I never knew existed. I knew honesty was 4 quarters for $1, but I didn't know what it meant when it came to being personal. I began to learn these things, and I began to change. I remember one night, old boy come up to me and put his arms around me. Remind me of Ted a lot. He said, Bo, you sure are growing. I thought I'd sprouted a tail. He meant my attitude had changed. I was smiling instead of frowning, and I was beginning to be a different person. Changing. We had an old boy riding through a town like St. George one time, saw this pretty girl standing up on the corner, and she was hitchhiking. He said, boy, I'm going to give her a ride. And he stopped that car, and she crawled in. And they were riding down the street, and he said, God, you are pretty. I'm going to kiss you. She said, no, don't you do that. I'm a witch. And he said, Lord, I ain't never believed them pumpkin stories and changing rats into white horses and Cinderella bit. Said, witch or no witch, I'm going to stop this car and kiss you. And he stopped that car and kissed her, and she turned him into a motel. So this is what happened when I came to AA. I didn't believe some of these things, but I got turned into something. My values were beginning to change. I wanted to be a different person. I've heard several statements down here since I've been here that impressed me a great deal. One of them the other night was, this fellow works out there on this oil rig, and he said, God that I don't understand, help me get sober. And this is true with me. In the beginning, I really didn't understand God, but yet I was sober. I've heard people come into me and say, well, I don't understand God. Well, let me tell you something, friend. God don't understand some people. They come to AA to get sober, and the wife comes, and the children come, and everything's going along pretty good. Don't ever give God credit. Don't ever say anything about that. I knew I had to go the full length. And it came that time in my life where I'd have to change. There comes a time when you've got to take these steps. I called old boy the other day to talk for me. He'd been sober 9 months. He was a dentist and just an absolute ass and just never could get sober. But he had been sober, and I thought somewhat honestly for 9 months. So I called him up. I said, how about come talk for me tonight? He said, I can't do that. I said, hell, that's the answer you've been given since you've been coming here. Can't do that. Now listen, when are you going to start doing some of the things that's necessary to do? I said, you aren't talking for me, Bright Eyes. You're talking for yourself. I just happen to be Chet. He says, all right, I'll come. I probably won't talk but about 10 minutes. So I said, well, I can talk 2 hours any given day. If you can't talk for 10 minutes, I'll fill it out. And he came. Showed up at the meeting with a damn legal pad and 6 pages of notes. A lot of clippings out of the magazines and stuff. Had them stringing along on the floor as he walked to the podium. I was walking along behind him, picking up all them poems and things he was going to read. Got up there and laid all this stuff out, you know. And he says, well, I got me some notes here because I wanted to have this talk in an orderly fashion. And like Solomon, he suddenly got wise and he shut the book, stuck him under the podium. He said, I ain't never done a damn thing orderly in my life. Why should this talk be like that? Put it away. I was 11 months sober. There's something about the first year of being sober. There's something about going to these places like we're at now. Getting something extra. Meeting extra special people. Going back home and sitting around the table dark, cold winter nights and laughing together about something old Westbury said. Or something old Jim said. Or that crazy doctor from California. Or that pretty girl from Oklahoma. Something about it. And I went to St. Simon's my first time. And I got there with 200 or 300 people, just absolutely beautiful. And you loved me so much until I had to do some of the things I needed to do. And I turned my life over to God. I didn't understand what I was doing, but I knew I needed to do it. I knew what you wanted me to do. You know, sometimes we do things for you hoping you'll do something. Kind of like the old boy in New York went through this bar in this hotel and saw this good-looking blonde sitting there. God, he knew she wasn't supposed to be there. He went through there every day. She wasn't there. He walked up to her and says, who in the world are you and where'd you come from? You're so pretty. She said, I'm from Iuka, Mississippi. So what in the world is a good-looking girl like you doing in New York from Iuka, Mississippi? She said, Mama won a prize on television. Mama didn't feel like coming up here to get it, and I come to get Mama's prize. And he said, well, let me take you out to dinner. And she says, all right, I never have seen New York. And by God, that night he was there all spiffed up like I am, got that girl, and took out to dinner in one of them fine restaurants. I was just in New York the other night, and boy, they wait on you like you're somebody. And said, what would you have? She says, I think I'll take some of those cute little escargots. Have me a cold glass of that white wine and some of that cold French vichyssoise, that soup. Then I'll have me some prime roast, and after that, some baked Alaska for dessert. He looked at her and he said, God have mercy. Does your mama feed you like that in Mississippi? She said, no, but mama never has wanted to sleep with me either, you know. But that's the way it is. Go to these places. They'll do that to us. They'll cause us to want to do things, you know. I wanted to know about God, and I think God's personal. I think it's personal. See, a lot of people get up and struggle and try to talk about God, what they think about God, what God means to them, what God's done for them. It's personal to me. It was personal when I first saw it in the 3rd step. It continues to be personal when I see it in the 11th step. It's personal when I read my book this morning and said, boy, it ain't necessary for you to know the design of your life. Just believe in the designer. So I came to know God. Very simple acceptance of Him. See, He exists. I always wanted to be sober, and I couldn't. I am. I know I am. I love the group. I love people. I got a good feeling in my heart. Tears are happy tears, and my laughter is from hope and faith. And I went home a different person. Wanted to change. And the book says on one of them first chapters there that the elimination of drink is but the beginning. There are certain things that we are going to do, and we need to do. It starts with the family. It goes on out into the world. I wanted to do that. First thing I thought about was helping somebody else, helping other people. I wanted to do that. Boy, I begged so many people to go to AA, it's pitiful. Man, they didn't want to go. I paid bad checks, went to jails, carried Arctic Consult, and God knows what all. I mean, I had a whole thing going. Not many didn't go, but I helped. And what I did was good for me. It eased that new need I had to help somebody. And then they didn't get sober, some of them. And somebody told me one time, said, Westbury, it isn't the results, it's the action and the attitude you had toward helping that's really important. I had to learn so many things when I got back home. These next steps are a revelation. Taking your inventory. Admitting to God and to another person the exact nature of your wrong. Man, I was a wronged up fellow. Still am. I remember one time I was coming home from work in the evening, you know, and listen, I am the president and chairman of the board. When you come to my company and see me, if you want to see anybody in high, you got to go to God. That's it. I mean, tell him. And I get there and I start changing them things I can't accept, you know, and I get all bent out of shape. And I come home in the evening and I ain't pretty, you know. I come home in the evening and Evelyn's standing there, you know, all dressed up and all puckered up wanting to kiss. Got a butterfly on, back door open. I woke up and I said, what, you some damn sex maniac or something hanging around here waiting on the first fellow comes in the house? Well, nobody was permitted to come to my house but the Baptist minister, whom I had made friends with, and my sponsor. I didn't know who the hell was coming. You know, and this is why ugly, I can be so ugly. I went on back in the bathroom and started cleaning up a little bit for dinner and looked at myself in the mirror, and the first thing that came to my mind was what you had told me. This ain't AA, boy. You can't do this. You can't act like this. You've got to go out there and say you're sorry. Now, how many alcoholics in this room love to promptly admit when they are wrong? Nobody. I didn't want to do it. But I said, if I don't do it tonight, I got to sleep on my side of the bed, man. I can't cross that damn yellow line. I got to stay over there, and in the morning I got to get up and pout, and I got to pout all day tomorrow and the next day, and then probably take a week to pout it out. But I can go out there and say, I'm sorry, and she say, you're forgiven, and that's it, and it'll all be over with, and I couldn't do it. But you know, if you're willing to work this program, God will help you. Tells you that before you start in the Serenity prayer. Courage and wisdom will come your way. So I decided I would write her a note. So I get my pencil out, you know, and I write her a note. I said, Dear Evelyn, I'm very sorry I said what I said. Would you please forgive me? And that seems so little. And by God, I'll go out and get a rose and put it in a beautiful antique bottle. I collect antique bottles, and I always tell this because occasionally somebody will send me one. I put it in that bottle, and I go into the kitchen, and I lay that note down there, and I put that flower right there by the flower, you know. And she comes over and picks it up and reads that thing. And God did, and she didn't embarrass me. She just wrote me on the bottom, you are forgiven. Do you know that that's all that God will ever ask of you? To say you're sorry? And that's all men should ever ask for, is to say you're sorry. That's all we need to do, if we can do it. So I grew some more that day. I continued to take these steps. I wasn't supposed to be sober. I knew this. They told me that in Lexington. I saw friends of mine. I've been in AA a long time, and I could count all the addicts who were sober on these two hands. I was in Statesboro one night having dinner with Dr. John and Cornel Foy. And we were talking about things that I told him. I said, I'm living with my mama, you know, and she don't understand me. Lord, we have our meetings on Monday night and Thursday night, and I got Friday, Saturday, and Sunday free. I'm going to get me a trailer and put it down on the lake so when my friends come to see me, I'll have a place to carry them. And Cornel said, you going to do what? I said, yeah. I'm going down on the lake so I can have some privacy on the weekends. He said, Dupree, do you know what you're about to do? If you put the trailer down there, you'll try to get a girl down there, and if you get the girl down there, you'll try to get her in bed, and you ain't never done that without getting drunk, and you're going to get drunk. He said, oh, the trouble is you're in heat and you don't know it. Now, we have a lot of problems in AA with sex, and now listen, I'm not kidding. I swear I know what I'm talking about. A lot of people get drunk because of this thing. I've heard people say, well, I've been sober now about 3 years. Got where I can remember my telephone number. My head's clearing up. By God, I cleared up all over. And I started working both ends. And them fellas in the group said, well, you can't do that. You ever see them fellas drive up to them meetings and them Cadillac wife get out with that fur on, you know, and sit on the front row and tell people like me what to do? Seems like to me the ones that's got it tells the ones that don't have it that we don't need it. I never have understood it. I hardly know where I am. God gave me my children back just like that. Their mother died, and they came to live with their father. I always wanted that. But it was a hell of a price to pay. But I was ready. I was ready. I was prepared. And when they came, I didn't have to throw the beads down when my prayers were answered. I kept them in my hand. I took on a new role in life, one of responsibility, trying to do things that I thought God would want me to do, and trying to be a better person, trying to help other people, trying to help myself, trying to improve myself on a daily basis, doing things for other people. And I would get the wisdom to know what to do when the time came. As you heard read yesterday on page 164, if your house is in order, you'll know what to do. Wisdom. Reminds me of the story of the two cannibals riding down the river in Dutch Guiana in the South Pacific. And the young boy was in front and his daddy was in the back, and they were paddling the boat down the river. And they turned the corner and saw this beautiful girl standing up there nude taking a bath. And the boy saw her first. He said, "Daddy, look what's up there in the river." And Daddy looked and he said, "Goodness." The boy said, "Let's go catch her and take her home and cook her." And Daddy got where he could see real good. He said, "Yeah, we're going to catch her and take her home, but we're going to cook your mama. That's who we're going to cook." Being sober, you know, and doing this program, you know who to put in the pot. I'm telling you, it's something. I want to tell you this right now. A lot of people I see in AA, they've been around 3 or 4 years and said, "Lord, I don't know why I'm sober. I just keep right on being sober. I ain't particularly happy, but I'm sober." I'll tell you, I don't want nobody to go home not knowing why. First of all, you're sober because somebody's prayers was answered and you came to AA. And God wants you to be sober. And if you read very carefully the preamble of AA, you have agreed to a covenant there. And the book tells you working with other people is an experience that I will not want to miss. So many people happy in AA that are working with others, some are not. If you haven't done yet and fulfilled that last sentence of the preamble, to stay sober and carry this message to the suffering alcoholic, you have let God down and let yourself down. You need to do it. This is a true story about a friend of mine. And I can talk 2 hours in any given day, but I'm just about through. But I want you to listen for the next 10 minutes at a very true story. Because when you go home, you'll be fortified with the hope and the instruction that you need to live a better life and help somebody. John was a friend of mine. We grew up together, went fishing together, went to the mud holes when we were 12 and 13, went on our first dates together. He furnished his daddy's car and I furnished the chewing gum. We were close. John had been discharged from the United States Air Force. Caught him drinking beer out in Cheyenne, Wyoming, one of them intercontinental ballistic missile silos. Kicked him out. He didn't like it. Come home resentful drinking. John and I used to go hunting together. He was the best bird shot in the county, and I could beat him. That's egotistical humility. John told me one day in the field shooting birds, he called me Uncle Dupe. He said, "Uncle Dupe, I want to be sober more than anything in the world. So I'll tell you what, I'll make an agreement with you. The next time you see me drinking, you shoot me, and if I see you drinking, I'll shoot you. Now, by God, if that ain't an honest desire to stop drinking, I don't know." And we'd never been to a meeting. And I immediately thought of John, and I went to see him. And I stopped at this little roadside station like we got, back home and like you have, and the woman said, "Where are you going, Dupree? I declare things are sure going so well for you." I said, "I'm going out to see John, go talk to him about getting sober." She said, "My God, don't go out there and mess with him. He ain't worth a damn. And you know it, he'll get you drunk. You don't remember when you all used to get drunk and shoot at people?" I said, "Yeah." "Well, don't go, because you're getting along so good now. But when your heart hurts for your friend or your neighbor, you got to go." And I went, and I told John about it. He said, I've been thinking about coming. I said, "You don't live out here by myself, and nobody to cook for me." He said, "When do you all have them eating meetings?" And I told him. And John became an associate member. He came to all the eating meetings and the birthday parties. He never did make none of them closed meetings where you talk about how bad you are, what you ought to do, and how you going to get better. Just want to be an associate member. But you don't last like that. And John got drunk, see? And he would flat mess up bad when he did. And got put on the chain gang over there in Darlington, South Carolina, and they had a racetrack over there. And John stayed on the chain gang for 3 weeks, and I wrote him a letter. I said, "Now, boy, if you want to get sober, this is what you got to do. Number one, you got to quit drinking. You got to change your attitude. You got to come home, and you got to go with me to the meetings. There comes a time when you got to tell people what they need to hear, whether you think they like it or not. Thank God for people who've got enough guts to stand up on your toe and say, listen, bastard, you ain't so smart. And if you don't do so and so, such will be the results. Save my life. I was trying to save his. He waited 3 weeks before he wrote me back. Pride keeps so many of us from enjoying the fulfillment of this program and ever coming. Kills us. And he finally wrote me and said, come get me. And I went and got John. He had burned his house down, and John moved back out to the farm in a little tenant house. And he didn't have anything to cook with. And we got him a cot, and Mother gave him a quilt and a kerosene lamp we use now, like when the hurricanes come. And a black frying pan. And this boy, this possessor of all this technology of intercontinental ballistic missiles and everything, is cooking a meager meal in a fireplace. We find an old stove on a trash pile and a table, and we carry it and put it in the house. And every day I go to see John, and every evening I come back to see John. If you go sponsor anybody, you go take somebody by the hand and say, come on and go with me. Rarely have we seen people fail, but if you go, you can make it. It's a damn big job. And it's constant. I'd go by in the morning, John would have the coffee made in that old pot, and he'd just dump a bunch of that instant coffee in it, pour me a cup, and I'd drink it because I loved him. God knows I didn't want it. It stayed in that same old pot, and I'd come by in the afternoon, we'd sit down in the rocking chair and look out there at nature and talk about how nice it was to be sober, and he'd get me another coffee out the same mixture that we made that morning and sit it down by my chair. He loved me, and I tried to drink it. I couldn't. Yeah, helping people. Boy, that's so important. Takes so much time, so much dedication, so much patience. And one day, one night, the telephone rang about 2 o'clock in the morning and says, is this Mr. Westbury? And I said, yes. So, well, your friend John had a heart attack. And he calls your name on his every breath. He's in the hospital and he's dying. And if I were you, I wouldn't rush up here, Mr. Westbury, because he'll be dead when you get here. And the first thing I thought about, I have done everything except talk to him about God. I have failed. Why is it? We get to the part that can save their lives and we shut up. And I said, God, if you don't let him die till I get there, I'm going to tell him tonight whether he hears me or not. I went up there and John thought he had the stomachache. He had drank about 2 quarts of salt water with vinegar in it and soda water and everything, wallowed around all over the ground, didn't have any pulse and was almost dead. Had him up under one of these tents and them old monitors are flashing, you know, and he laying up under there like he's going to die. But he didn't die. I keep going back to see him. He started getting better, you know. One day I walked in, and he was in a semi-private room, kind of like Paul, but he had a fellow with him. And this fellow's laying over there, and he's had a stroke. He can't move a damn muscle. And John tells me, he says, Uncle Duke, they hadn't given me a cigarette the whole time I've been here. I said, you got to be kidding. He said, no. I said, he said, and I want one too. And I said, by God, you get one. I reached under that cover and got him out of there, and all them wires were stringing out behind him, and held him in my arms and carried him over to the bathroom and let him smoke one time. Looked back at that fellow that's paralyzed. I said, if you say a damn word, we'll roll you out in the hole. Of course he didn't, and we didn't have to roll him out there. I put him back in there and tucked him in, done all the things. He told me when I went to leave, he said, are you coming back tomorrow? You ever notice an alcoholic, he's just down to one friend, you know? And he looks at you and he said, are you coming back to see me tomorrow? I mean, hell, you got to go. He ain't got nobody else. Make out like we could go every other day and let somebody else have it tomorrow. Who's going tomorrow? I went back. He said, would you bring me some fried squash? I said, certainly. He says, I love fried squash. I said, I do too. I went home, I told Evelyn, I said, cook some fried squash for John. She said, Jesus. Man, them professional people, I mean, you go to talk to them about doing something they learned in college, they draw up my damn knot right now. I said, let me tell you something. Nurse, no nurse, Al-Anon, I don't give a damn. Cook 'em. By God, she cooked. And I wrapped them up in a dish with some tin foil, and I went there to the desk, and I told the nurse, I said, I'm Dupree Westbury. You probably heard of me. She said, yes, we have. And I said, my wife fixed a dish for my friend John, and she's a registered nurse. She knows what diets heart people should have. And she fixed this for him, and I'm taking it to him. She said, by all means, go ahead. I went in there. I told John, I said, I'm back, and I got the fried squash. He said, good. We pulled the curtain on the old paralyzed fella. And John would open up the dish, and reach in there and get some of them fried squash out and eat them, and then he'd cover them back up and stick them back in that old washstand. I told him, you got to eat them quickly or ferment. And he would eat them, and we would talk about things, and directly this fella come dragging in the room and said, hey, how are you doing? I was at the hospital. And he told him what his name was. We just recently give the church a steeple in memory of my father. And his name was Frank. And Frank said, I'm the pastor from Bowman. I'm your sister's pastor. Never have seen an alcoholic yet with his own pastor, his sisters or his brothers, somebody else. We ain't got no pastor. He talked to John. He said, John, you getting along pretty good. I'll tell your sister you're looking better. And he says, and I got so many other people to see, I'm going. Well, he knew John. Knew me, man. He wasn't hanging around there. And we went to leave John's hand, shot out from under the cover and grabbed him by his coat. And he said, would you do something for me before you leave? And John said, what is it? He said, would you pray for me? I never heard that boy say that in his life. And he says, yes, I'll do it, but don't you think it would be better if you did it yourself? Now, he gets wise like salt, and John starts to pray. And I remember the words that John said, 2 or 3 little sentences about like that. That man quit what he was doing, reached in his pocket and pulled out the book to Romans 10:9 said, whosoever believeth on the name of the Lord shall receive help. And walked out. I could never tell John about God, but God let me be there to see it done. He let me see it. I went home that night and I got over Evelyn and I went to bouncing the bed up and down. She was coming off that thing like a hot cake off a waffle. She said, what's wrong with you? I said, wake up. John knows about God. Not long after that, he got a little better and said he was coming home. Came over to the Walboro meeting one night with this ugly woman. Looked like she'd been in about 20 wrecks. A year before that, he wouldn't spit on her. But he said, Uncle Duke, she needs AA so bad. I said, well, by God, if she needs it, bring it. Bring her. You know what to do. So he brought her. And she sat up there on the row by Evelyn, and John sat over there by me. When he give out the chips, she got one. I was watching. Wasn't nobody punching or nothing. She wanted to be better. John said, ain't that good? She took a white chip. I said, that's wonderful. He said, do you know I'm moving home Saturday? I said, that's wonderful. I said, I am scheduled to go to a ball game, go down to Charleston and see old Al Hurt blow his trumpet, but I'll be by to see you. He said, please do. And that Saturday evening, I was sitting in watching my favorite football team get whipped, and the telephone rung and said, this Dupree Westbury? And I said, yeah. He said, well, we've been trying to find you. Your friend just died. So John come home a while ago. He was bringing his clothes home. He put a load in the house, got in the car, backing out, and he died. and the car backed out into the field. He's laying down over the wheel, and he's dead, and the car is still running, and you saved his life, and we wanted you to be the first one to know. I went out there, and he was dead. He was. But he had been sober 17 months. He had a birthday party, going to church. I saw him pray more than one time, down in the woods, just me and him. The next day when we got ready to bury John, Sister come up to me and pulled his chip out of his pocket and said, when we undressed him, we found this. July 17th, 1966. It was October the 7th, 1967. And we knew you gave it to him. We saw you give it to him that Sunday. And because you did what? We want you to have it back. And I said, yes, I want it. And I walked over and stuck it in John's pocket. And the people that told me that this boy wasn't worth a damn came to the funeral. And we buried John with 17 months of sobriety. And one time he was with me, and I told about him and my talk. And he said, Uncle Dupree, if you ever want to say anything about me anywhere to anyone, you can. So I have his permission. I was sober. I knew about God. John got sober, and John knew about God. That's AA. Helping people. We are God's chosen people to do what we've got to do. We enjoyed ourselves here, I'm sure of that. But when we go back home, we'll be confronted somewhere with a John out there in the street that'll need help. Somebody will be reaching out a hand, wanting you to help him. You got to remember that. God has given me more than I ever thought I would ever have. And many of those things are the things that I didn't have on my list. The opportunity to come to Panama City. The opportunity to hear Jim talk about, oh, what's her name? The opportunity to hear Paul discuss Al-Anonism. The opportunity to meet Dot and Stan, and I didn't know who they were. The opportunity to see Claire again, to meet Ted and to see Dennis. The opportunity to be in your heart and your world and in your mind and in your life. And as long as I stay there, I'll be a better person. I thank God for you, but most of all for AA. Thank you.